Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Seeds and Weeds podcast brought to you by Small House Farm. Are you a gardener, a forager, an herbalist? Maybe you're just a little plant curious? Well, you've come to the right place. This is Seeds and Weeds. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Today we're going to be sitting down with Charlie Nardozzi to talk about his brand new book, The Continuous Vegetable Garden. Charlie's going to be talking to us about how to grow more food with less time and less effort. We're going to be covering things like creating healthy soil, growing perennials in raised beds, growing perennial crops like rhubarb, horseradish, plenty of herbs too. We're going to be talking about self-seeding annuals, plant propagation, overwintering peppers, planting a fruit orchard, and extending the growing season. This episode is just absolutely packed with information. Down in the show notes, you'll find links to get Charlie's book, either through his website or our Amazon affiliate link, and you'll also be able to click through to learn more about the gardening webinar that Charlie mentions during our conversation. You know, we're always asking you to share feedback with us about the show, and many of you have mentioned that you missed the interviews with authors and other gardeners, so we're bringing them back. We're going to be doing semi-regular interviews, again, just for you, and we're kicking things off today with Charlie Nardozzi, author of The Continuous Vegetable Garden. Now, Charlie's a nationally recognized garden speaker, writer, radio and television personality, and he brings expert gardening information to home gardeners through radio, television, lectures, the internet, and the printed page. Charlie delights in making garden information simple, easy, fun, and accessible to everyone. He has his own radio and television shows, is a well-known public speaker, and the author of multiple books, including his latest, The Continuous Vegetable Garden. Like I mentioned, this conversation is just absolutely packed, so let's get right into it. Hello, Charlie. Welcome to the Seeds and Weeds podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here, Bevan. Thanks for having me.
Now, I'm really looking forward to digging into your new book, The Continuous Vegetable Garden, but before we get into all that, could you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
So I'm based in Vermont, but I do work all around the country. I've authored 8 different books. This is my 8th book. I have a website, gardeningwithcharlie.com, where you can read articles, listen to podcasts, watch videos I've produced, all through there, and learn more about where I'm speaking around the country and the different things I'm doing. I'm actually doing a webinar on this very topic, the continuous vegetable garden, on February 10th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you want to join me for that, you can find out more about that on my website. And I do garden tours. I'm leading garden tours to usually the UK and Europe. This year we're going to England and Portugal. So it keeps me busy.
It sounds like you're pretty busy. That's fantastic. This book of yours, now as we're recording this is February 3rd. The book has come out today. Today's the official launch date.
Yes, woohoo! It's out there. It's on bookshelves. It's online. It's everywhere.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations. Now,
Thank you.
I love the book, but I think my favorite thing on the cover of this book is there's a spot here where it says less time, less effort, more food, and I love that so much. That's exactly what we're all looking for, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I wrote this book, is because these are techniques that I've been doing for a number of years. And as my wife and I get older, we're just not as inclined to spend so much time out in the garden trying to take care of things. So we're coming up with techniques that's going to make it easier. And that's what this book is all about, through using perennial vegetables and herbs, self-sowing vegetables and herbs, techniques like succession planting, intercropping, companion planting. You can actually have a real healthy garden in a small space that produces food for you continuously. That's where the name comes in, right through the growing season.
Now, the book kicks off. One of the first things you dig into is the soil, which obviously that's very, very important to have a healthy garden. And you also talk about building raised beds for continuous production. So could you explain to our listeners a little bit, what are the things that we would need to consider if we're planning to grow perennial crops in a raised bed? Yeah,
so if you're going to do a raised bed, now, of course, I'm sure your listeners are gardeners, so they know the advantages of raised bed gardening, but are really in the soil kind of profile of putting together a garden. Raised beds gives the advantage of building them up in what I call a no-dig system, or a lasagna gardening system. So you can do layers of organic materials, cap it all off with compost, and then grow things in there. And that gives you the advantage of not having to be so dependent on your native soil being perfect. perfect because you're creating great soil right on top of it. Now, if you're doing that for perennial vegetables, it's even more important because some of these, like asparagus, can last for decades, or rhubarb, for example. So you're going to want to have really healthy soil, good, well-drained soil that those plants can really thrive in and continue to grow and produce for you for years to come.
Now, you mentioned some of these classic perennial vegetables already, like rhubarb and asparagus, but in the book, you dig into some less common plants as well, things like good King Henry, there's horseradish, artichokes, a whole bunch of different perennial herbs. What are some of the benefits, but also let's dig into some of the challenges of growing these perennial crops?
Well, the benefits are obvious. I know if you're doing more perennial crops, that means you're not having to sow things, prepare beds, do a lot of the work that you normally find yourself doing in an annual vegetable garden. So the more you can incorporate perennials in there, it's going to be less work for you, and the plants will just kind of take care of themselves for the most part, with a little, additions of compost and things like that, of course, to keep them going. But the challenge, of course, is that you have to kind of stay on top of them because some of these perennials, as you probably know, Bevan, they like to move around. And you get horseradish that can kind of take over the universe. We put our rhubarb in the edge of a bed once, and it was like an 8-foot long raised bed. And after about 3 or 4 years, it was taking up like half the bed. And we don't need that much rhubarb. We like rhubarb, but we don't need that much rhubarb. So it is something that you do have to maintain them. So with rhubarb and horseradish, for example, we dig them up in the spring sometimes, move things around, give away some of the divisions, just kind of creating a smaller space for them because we only need so much of them.
Yeah, I had the same issue with the horseradish, and I thought, well, I can just dig it up. I'll make horseradish, prepare it for in the kitchen, but I can't eat that much as it's producing.
Right. I love horseradish too, but no, this year was difficult because the ground froze earlier than I was anticipating. So I only got to dig up a little bit of it before everything froze up. And I'm not really ready to go out there with an ice axe to dig up my horseradish roots.
Right. Okay. So in the next section of the book, you start to explore self-seeding plants. So many of these are annuals, but some of them are biennials, of course. And then they flower, they produce copious amounts of seed, which I also enjoy as far as, the less effort that we have to put into planting crops. What are some of your favorite self-seeding annuals that you like to grow every year?
I love to tell this story because this is kind of how I got into self-sowing. I have some radio shows and TV shows that I've done and I continue to do. And the one here in Burlington, Vermont, I've done many, many years. So when I was young and used to go to the studio armed with books so I can answer people's questions, I got a call from an older gardener who said, giving me a tip about how you can grow lettuce without any effort. And what he would do is that in March, he would go out to his garden and he would sprinkle lettuce seed on top of the snow in the beds where he wanted it to grow. And he swore that seed would germinate faster and the plants would be healthier than ones that he would plant in May or April or May, whenever he normally did it, or transplanted. And of course, being a young, precocious gardener, I thought, he doesn't know what he's talking about until I tried it. And it actually works. So that kind of got me down the road of self-sowing vegetables. So lettuce is a great example of it. Most of us have been trained all these years to deadhead lettuce or dig up your lettuce plants once they start bolting, right? It's gone by. You can't really eat it. There's no need to have it there. But if you let lettuce seed and go up and form a flower and form a seed, it will drop seed in your garden in the early summer. And if it's a warm enough and long enough season, you'll actually get little lettuce plants germinating in the fall. So we have a fall crop of lettuce that I never even planted. And then some of that seed will actually overwinter. So you get a spring crop of lettuce that I never really planted. And so the only challenge with this is that you're going to get, like you were mentioning, a lot of seedlings if you have really healthy plants. So you're going to have to do some garden editing. That's what I call it. You go out there, you'll thin things out, you'll move things around because some of these seeds will drop in pathways or in places where you don't want them. So you dig up the ones you want, put them where you want in your garden. Much easier, much more relaxed than trying to figure out when are you going to sow the seed? Is it going to germinate? If it doesn't germinate, can I have to sow some more seeds? You don't have to worry about that because Mother Nature knows when seeds should germinate and they takes care of themselves. You just have to manage it a little bit. And it works for greens like lettuces, arugula, spinach, kale. Lots of these greens will self-sow. Mustard greens, another one that self-sows pretty readily. And I mentioned a number of other crops in there that self-sow in the book as well.
I love this concept of garden editing. Like you mentioned, that's really fun. So for me, sometimes when this happens, it'll be like, oh, I'm just going to change my plans because obviously this lettuce wants to be here. So whatever I had planned, I'll do something different and let this lettuce have that space.
And fortunately, lettuce is a short-lived crop. You can harvest it at any point in time. So you can have it somewhere where you didn't really think of it, but then I'll plant some tomatoes in around it because the tomatoes are going to take so much longer to mature. By the time they get big, the lettuce will be gone. So that's another aspect of this book where you do a lot of interplanting that way.
The book also explores seed saving and other methods of plant propagation, which I really appreciated that. In particular, the seed saving. We do a lot of that here on our farm.
Great.
So yeah, I really enjoyed that. You also talk about overwintering plants, which I thought was really fun. Could you explain to us briefly the process of overwintering peppers and why we might want to do that?
So yes, if you have a favorite pepper plant, a favorite variety, one that you really love, or you just want to get a jump start on your peppers next year, you can actually overwinter the plant. The peppers and tomatoes, and eggplants for that matter, are all perennials in the right climate. In our climate, in Vermont or in Michigan, of course, they're only annuals. But if you take your pepper plant at the end of the season, the one you really like, dig it up out of the ground, knock all that soil, wash all that soil off the root system, maybe trim the roots a little bit so it's a nice ball of roots, and then do a big massacre on the top of the plant. You're literally going to cut this way back until you have maybe 8-inch tall, couple 8-inch tall stems coming off that main stem that are on a V kind of shape. And I have a photo in the book that shows a good example of that. Then you're going to pot those up, put them in a pot with some fresh potting soil, water them and bring them inside. Now, once they're inside, you want to put them in a room that has bright and direct light, but doesn't get too cold, doesn't get too hot. It's got to be like just in the middle there. So something around 50 degrees. So what you're wanting is keep it warm enough that they're not going to get damaged by the cold temperatures, but don't keep it so warm that it'll actually start growing in January or February. You don't want to have that. If you do that, you'll have a plant that'll just stay kind of in a semi-dormant state until maybe April, when you can start putting it in a warmer room and more sun. It'll leaf out. And then when you put it out in May sometimes, it's going to be a mature plant that you're putting in, not a little seedling that we normally get, but a mature plant with mature roots. So it's going to grow faster, produce earlier, and you're going to get more peppers from that plant.
Another part of the book that I really enjoyed is you dug into planting a fruit orchard. And
yes.
Yeah, that's not something that you see often explored in a gardening book. Typically that's a whole other book that you're going to get. But
right.
You devoted, it's 2 full chapters in this book. It's like 47 pages all about growing fruit. And I thought that was a really cool addition to this entire concept of continuous gardening. This may seem really obvious, but could you explain to our listeners a little bit more about why we should be considering trying to grow more fruit in our garden?
Yeah, I think a lot of the modern advances in fruit growing are really perfectly geared towards a small space home gardener. So you're seeing a lot more dwarf trees. You might have noticed this in Michigan. A lot of like apple orchards, for example, are growing trees that only get 6 to 8 feet tall now in rows, as opposed to having big orchards, because they're just so much easier to care for and they produce earlier and you can just really get a nice quality crop out of them. So you're seeing that in a lot of different fruits, whether it be tree fruits or berry bushes, that there are dwarf varieties of things that can really produce nicely and not take up too much space. And at the same time, those dwarf varieties are there's a number of them that are self-fertile. So you don't need 5 different fruit trees or 5 different berry bushes, or maybe you only need 1 or 2, and that will be enough. So keeping in mind this whole idea of a continuous garden where you're continuously getting fruit and you're not overwhelmed with things like if you plant beans, of course, in 60 days, you get tons of beans. Or if you plant a whole orchard of apples, in September, you're getting tons of apples. The idea with this book is, so let's do a diversity of different kinds of fruits, small quantities of each one, and do it in such a way that it's going to continue moving from one fruit to another fruit right through the spring, summer, and fall. So I start the book with one of my favorite new types of fruits, and that's called a honeyberry. This is a plant that's in the honeysuckle family, very hardy, originally from Siberia, I think. It's not invasive for people who might be concerned about that. And it's a small kind of spirea-shaped shrub, but it produces these beautiful cylinder-shaped purple berries 2 weeks before strawberries. So this is the first fruit that I have in our garden that starts producing, and it produces in abundance. You have to have 2 different varieties, but they don't take up a lot of space. I do literally nothing to these shrubs. I should do more, but I do nothing to them. And every year they produce an abundance of fruit. We put some netting over them to stop the birds from getting them. We do a couple big harvests, then we pull the netting off and they can have the rest. There's so much in there. So we start with that, and then we go into strawberries, and then black raspberries, which are a little earlier than the other brambles out there, and blackberries and blueberries come in, and then you got cherries starting. We have cherry trees like the dwarf North Star tart cherry, which is a great one because you only need 1 tree. It's self-fertile. It only grows maybe 10, 12 feet tall. We've had ours for about 12 years, and it's about that height, 10, 12 feet tall. A beautiful tree, produces consistently every year. And again, if you can keep the birds off of it, you can get a really nice crop of it. Plums come in after that, and maybe you'll need a couple varieties of those. And then you move towards the fall with apples and pears and the fall raspberries. And then there's some exotic native fruits that are really fun to grow that I love to see people trying more and more. One is pawpaws. Don't know if you've tried those yet, Bevan, but they're a lot of fun. Yeah, oh, good. That's good to know. And the other is the American persimmon. Unlike the Asian persimmon that you see in California, this is a variety that's hardy to zone 4, developed in New Hampshire, so it can grow in many areas in the north. And it produces these small little fruits that will hang on the tree into November. So you can have literally a fruit harvest from May to November just by selecting the right kinds of plants and putting them in the right places in your garden.
That's fantastic. Talk about continuous, right? I mean, that was through the whole season. That was really cool. It's that time of year. I'm already getting excited for the garden, and this book has really fed into that frenzy for me. And then you wrap up the book. You've got instructions on how to extend the growing season. You've got a chapter about bringing plants indoors so you can enjoy them in the wintertime. So do you have any advice other than the obvious, go get a copy of this book? Do you have any other advice for folks that are looking to bring this idea of continuous gardening into their gardens this year? Something to get them started.
So if you're interested in this whole big topic, and it is a huge topic, certainly there are lots of resources online. I don't really claim that I've invented any of these ideas. These are all ideas that any experienced gardener probably does, a little bit here, a little bit there. But what I pride myself in having done in this book is put it all in one place so you can see how it all works together. So for example, I have a whole chapter on diagrams, on illustrations, on raised bed and succession planting and interplanting and companion planting. For example, in spring, you have your bed and this is what it looks like, and this is what we'll plant in a full sun garden. And then in summer, this is what the bed's going to look like. Maybe you've removed some plants and you've planted some other things, or some things have died and you put something in. And then fall, this is what it's going to look like. So literally, you can take the book and go out into the garden and plan a raised bed based on this. And I did that for 6 different raised beds in a full sun garden, 4 beds in a part shade garden, and even a hot climate garden that's in there too. So all that kind of information is available and you can find it, but it's nice to use my book or my webinar that I mentioned before on February 10th at 6 p.m. I record that webinar, so even if you can't make it on that date, if you sign up, I'll send you the recording. And that way you can watch it whenever you want and just kind of go back to it and refer to it.
That's fantastic. So give us the website so folks can connect with you, check out the webinar, and get their hands on a copy of The Continuous Vegetable Garden.
Yeah, my website is gardeningwithcharlie.com. That's Charlie with an IE. So it's gardeningwithcharlie.com. You can also just search for Charlie Nardozzi. It'll pop right up. And like you're saying, all the information is there. Just tour around and see what you can find.
That's awesome. Charlie, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, man. That was really great.
Thanks for having me, Bevan. Take care.
Well, here we are at the end of yet another show together. Big thanks to Charlie Nardozzi for being our guest today, and to all of you for tuning in. Remember, if you enjoy the podcast, you can always show your support by joining our community on Patreon. You can find a link to that and so much more at seedsandweedspodcast.com. This episode was edited and produced by all of us here at Small House Farm, and the music we're enjoying right now is a little Jazz Cafe from Toon Tank. Thanks again for joining us, my friends. I'm Bevan Cohen, and we'll see you next time.